This is the Future of IP Protection podcast, brought to you by Mark Vision. This show is dedicated to arming companies with the skills, know-how, and technology they will need to future-proof their IP protection strategy for the years ahead.
Welcome to the Future of IP Protection podcast. I'm your host, Branddy Spence, head of marketing at Mark Vision, and I'm really excited about our guest today. You'll be hard-pressed to find anyone as passionate about intellectual property rights as Jayne Durden, trademark and brand protection advisor at Sanders IP Law, which advocates for technologists, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Hey, Jayne, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Branddy. Great to be with you.
So, Jayne, before we dive into the details, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background and the work that you do at Sanders IP Law?
So I've been in intellectual property just about my entire career. I'm from Australia originally and worked there with really big brands before the internet existed. So I like to say that my career has sort of straddled some pretty critical changes in how we sell things, how we work together, and how brands are used. But since then, I've worked in-house at PPG Industries and most recently at Tectronic Industries and also at law firms. I worked at the web law firm in Pittsburgh, at Lattice and Parry, and I now work for a boutique law firm, Sanders IP. And I've also worked for providers. And so it's been really interesting to sort of see what the brand owners are looking for, or maybe don't even know that they need to look for, what outside counsel's role is at a law firm, and then how providers and how sort of the industry is moving to help support brand owners and to make sure that we're looking for brand protection and protecting against counterfeit. It's fun, and it's fun to be able to really look around every time I leave the house or sit with my kids and think, yeah, I do that. I help with that, or I should be helping with that.
Typically would take my kids as well sometimes to stores, and they're pretty impressed with, oh, you protect that or you protect that brand. I'm sure your kids probably feel the same way. As somebody who's really deeply passionate about IP protection, I'm sure you have a lot of insights into the current landscape. From your perspective, what are some of the challenges and the opportunities in the IP space right now?
I think it gets back to exactly what I was talking about with the birth of the internet. You know, when I first came into practice, the way that you sold products and goods and services were definitely directly. And so the path to getting products into the marketplace, to market them, to sell them, and the way that consumers operated with them were a very traditional model. They had to go through certain checks and balances, and all sorts of people saw things before they got out there. And the same thing at the end. Typically, products were sold either properly or improperly in a very direct way. And so that you'd be looking for it. Look, my first year in practice, Australia had just won the Olympics. We were out there to demonstrate that we were protecting the Olympics brand. And I was sent to the local market to literally go and walk stall to stall. That's how you found infringement. That is just not the way we buy products, that people operate, and that good and bad players in the marketplace are operating anymore. So as technology and as our marketplaces have changed, so too have the way that infringers are operating, and so too are the way that we need to operate. I just think it's fascinating. In preparing for today, I was thinking, how much anymore do I go to a store and buy something? When was the last time that I walked into a store and looked at real goods and bought them?
When you do, you're usually looking online first, right? Before you even, go there.
Exactly. And so look, it's certainly changed. We've changed the way that we're buying things. And that inherently also changes the way that we as brand protection specialists need to operate. We've always needed to think, sort of try and keep ahead of bad players and infringers. But now that means getting ahead of technology. So a lot of my 2022 was spent in getting ahead of the question that everybody in the business I was working in wanted to understand. What's the Metaverse? What's Internet 3.0? But you can see, right, that if people and businesses are struggling with the idea of what are these online marketplaces or what are these online spaces and how does my brand play here and how might other people play with my brand here? That's one thing. You lay out NFTs on top of that and then, a good sprinkling of some new ideas and that's what's happening. So our job is to really stay ahead of this technology, to stay ahead of understanding what are people trying to do, what people might be doing in the future for good or for bad, and helping our clients very much work in terms of how could you leverage your brand? How might you, what might be really advantageous, and what might you need to do to protect your brand that way? And then similarly, just as much effort needs to go into if you are or are not playing in these spaces, you better believe that somebody else is there. And so we need to get out of there, and we need to get out there, and we need to monitor it. So we've been monitoring a lot of the Metaverse wallet domains. We've been monitoring a lot of the online spaces. I've been in more game environments and Metaverse environments than I ever thought I would need to. And my teenage son is like looking over my shoulder. What are you doing, Mum? I love it.
I feel like Roblox, Mom, really?
Just, checking out a concert in the Metaverse. What are you doing? That's really what it is. And you've certainly seen the way that the law has, the law is an amorphous concept too. It's got to keep up with what's going on. So we've all been waiting with bated breath with these Supreme Court rulings that have come out. Metaverse, that's just one little piece of it. The next is, how do we file for these? What might we need to do to help protect our clients' brands? And that's actually changed pretty significantly over the last 18 months. So the reason I like my job, but it's the reason why I'm up sort of late at night on the internet checking things out.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it's about staying that one step ahead always, because you know that the counterfeiters are. It's those tools, those technology tools that are helping these brands find new consumers or grow and expand for even smaller brands that are really helping these counterfeiters as well. So, and it's tough, as you mentioned, even the laws, they're usually, a few steps behind.
Branddy, one of the things I think we've been looking at too is the idea that how consumers or how anybody interacts with the brand has inherently changed. So look, when I first came to the state, we were looking at protection for any of the .com top level domain names. And that expanded when the GTLDs came out, and all sorts of other ways that you could do it. But the rise of social media and all of us being able to play in that space, to be able to publish immediately from our phone, to use brands properly or improperly, has really risen. It led to the rise of some really interesting issues. As a brand owner, you want people to be interacting with it. You want your brand to be used, but you need it to be used properly. Huge portion of what I was doing at TTI and now with other clients is looking at how do you market effectively without losing control? Because that's exactly what happens when you put the means of publishing into everybody's hands. You fit on that line. And so it sounds great, right, to have an online influencer. You and I were talking about sailing just before that I do it in my free time. I, work with a lot of new companies that are starting there. Really easy to get an influencer to mention your brand or to be a brand spokesman. But what do? Do you control what they're going to say about the brand so that they only publish good things? No, not all the influencers want to be doing that. When they do go out, do you have enough of the brand outline and a brand protection strategy that you are telling them how they should be using it? And are the platforms helping to keep up with what you might need to be able to do? This used to be fairly straightforward. You'd have a marketing company that we as the brand owner would be working with. We'd give them the brief. We'd contract for what it was that they would do. And they would have to get permission just about for any paper publication that would come out. I wish it was like that. That is not how it works. And so the speed and the volume of which this is all happening is just expanded exponentially. And so now the decisions definitely have to be, what's the worst that's going on? What can we afford to take action? We cannot afford to take action against everything. And so it becomes a lot of that sort of discussion with the clients in terms of be careful how you're approaching marketing and how you approach who you're using, because it can actually add to your costs. And then once you start looking, you're never going to be able to take action about everything you see. So you've got to pick what are the worst egregious all the way down to, there's probably no point in taking action.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you and I had also talked a little about before we hopped on this was about, our children and Gen Z generation in general. And you mentioned social media. I mean, they are definitely some of the smartest, most frugal, but very socially, environmentally conscious, of all generations. And social media is obviously playing a huge role for them and how they buy as well. What do you advise your customers when it comes to that generation and how they should approach them? And do they educate them at all about the social perils of counterfeits?
So the big picture here, right, is that one of the most effective ways that any brand can help to reduce counterfeit is to stop consumers buying inauthentic goods. And when you're dealing with Coach or sort of high-end goods like that, I think brands have done a really good job of being really successful about educating why it's important that you buy an authentic brand, and it's positioned and priced in a way that consumers would want to do that. And usually it's around the cost of goods and the impact of inauthentic goods. And I think this works well with people of my age. I want to know that it's not made by children and that I've spent $500 and I got $500 worth. It's different with my kids and your kids and lots of kids. Really interesting project that the International Trademark Association runs around brand awareness and counterfeit has been getting into high schools and working with them about educating them around the impact of inauthentic goods. And the thing that I took away from that, as well as from talking to my kids, is the drivers for us as consumers are very different than they are for kids, for teenagers. So my daughter has little to no desire to buy name brand goods. She's not looking for a dress that will last a lifetime with a brand that will stand behind it or any sort of sense of legacy or anything like that. They had their winter formal last Friday night and she wanted a cute dress and she got a cute dress and she'll probably pass it on to somebody else. So she's driven by different things. She is concerned about quality because she doesn't want her hard-earned money from her nighttime job to go into something that she can't wear, but she's not looking for the same sort of quality of goods that we might be looking at for the things that we're buying. They're also really interestingly not driven by a lot of brands. And I'll give you the example of same said, very cute, very small green sequined dress from last Friday night. That came from online. And if you look at a lot of this end of fashion, what you're going to find when you go on is that where'd she find it? Instagram ads. And what was interesting was having a chat is that same dress was offered through 5 or 6 different vendors once she clicked on it to show that she was interested in that. Now, I don't know enough about how fashion like this is manufactured. I'll bet it's from China. It's manufactured and then made available under a number of different brands that then use social media to market it. Probably the same distributor, maybe. Who knows? Who cares? She certainly doesn't care. And so it's really, really interesting when we get up to looking at this, which is that that's not a driver for her. What is a driver for her is when she does spend money on something and it doesn't fit within her sense of ethics. It's really interesting listening to them. She's very concerned about organizations that might have anti-LGBTQ statements. She'll be very concerned about organizations that might have made statements about Black Lives Matter. And so these sort of social drivers for her and her friends are really, really, really keen. And you'll see them sort of talking through that. Interestingly, if the food's good enough, even if the restaurant might have made a statement, it sometimes can be overcome. But you can see them as developing consumers really looking at this. I think one of the things that I've really been thinking about, though, is whether if the law is branding, is everything keeping up with how this set of consumers are really buying things? How are we going to see that sort of pattern changing? Surely they will change as they buy more expensive things and have to invest more money into goods. But does it inherently mean that as there's this new way of buying goods and some different drivers for buying goods, does that change whether or not our trademark and brand protection laws are keeping up with these things? I'm not sure, but I certainly sort of watch it and think about that a lot of the time.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about technology. As we look into the future of IP protection, you mentioned some of these technologies, NFTs and the metaverse. Is there anything specifically that you see might play a crucial role in how we protect intellectual property? Any of these specific technologies?
We need technology. We can't do this alone anymore. You cannot do it manually. You can't do it from your desktop. You're just not going to be capable of doing it. So look, previously in-house, we had a suite of brands, and we had to prioritize which of those brands we could take action on, and then prioritize where we thought the most damaging activity would happen. And there'd always be something that I thought we were missing, always be something that I thought we should bring in. So I think the importance of technology is to help us stay even further ahead of what's going on. Tell us about, as technology providers, tell us about things that we might not know about. Tell us about ways to solve the problem. Don't tell me something if you can't help me fix it, because then you're right. Me. But certainly sort of looking at, here's a strategy, here's a platform, here's what we've seen, and this is a way that you could help protect against it. So I think platforms that are really thinking laterally and very broadly about where the infringement might occur is fantastic. I've been really interested in some problematic instances of NFTs being sold with 3D printing CAD files that you're then basically buying for the NFT.
Okay.
That give you the 3D printing capability to make aftermarket parts that are compatible with some of our client products.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. And that is sort of 3 steps removed, but really problematic. When you make products that you might then add these to, you've got some dangerous products in the marketplace. We might have these. We might be looking at stopping our clients being able to file for protection for these aftermarket add-on components that go with the product. And so it's this, please help us think very broadly, very widely, and help us make some sense of that. In terms of making sense of that, I've sort of spoken about the fact that quite often in this area, we're really educating ourselves and our clients and our clients as we go through. So as many kind of what is the Metaverse 101 conversations and how are these things evolving and changing, I think is important. But the same thing when information comes in. So as more information is available, being more organized, that information can be reported to us, that we can then pass on to our clients. That is amazing. And that is really good. And the final part about that, I've been really impressed with a few providers where they've given me the information, but also given me a strategy and given me a solution. So sometimes it's really simple, right? Which is when we're dealing with some online platforms, providers can do that on your behalf. You don't necessarily need a lawyer, but really helping to sort that into categories. These ones here rely on patents. You're going to need to take civil action and use that to take down on this. These ones are problematic. You should handle that. These ones look easy and we can help you do that. Will you do that? That is amazing, because the one problem that IP owners have and now law firms have on their behalf is just resources. So providing information is fantastic. Providing a solution is amazing, but providing literally a service solution as well is an absolute godsend, because we're all trying to sort of stay ahead and get on top of it and make sure we're helping these brands. We can't do it alone. So we're really looking to partner up.
Right. A true partner, real resources, real opportunity to know exactly where you need to prioritize and take action, right?
My final technology ask is a bit of a wish list. If I look at my desktop from day to day, and I've got information coming from the client, and I've got information about all my clients, and I've got a search portal on this and that and this and that. Increasingly, I'd love, especially for trademarks where there's no restrictions of private, I'd love those things to talk to each other. So I'd love solution providers to really be able to think about how can they connect the information that they're giving us with the information that we're holding on behalf of our clients, and how can we do the same when we pass it on to our clients. And I think, APIs should be pretty much a given. I think people thinking sensibly about how they can connect that to pass information through to connect is amazing. We don't all have to have all the information, but someone's got most of it. And if we can connect more of that together, now we can start to see pictures and patterns in that information. And that is really amazing and really actionable.
Yeah, that's something we do hear of a lot. We also hear for need of offline. How do you connect that online with the offline component quite a bit too? Let's step boldly into the future of intellectual property. What do you think IP is going to look like 5 years from now?
Great question. It's going to be faster. It's going to be a little more consumable, and it's going to speak for itself. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that brands are really going to start to speak themselves, and they're going to sort of take other brands on a little bit more. Sanders, we're pretty well known for the cookie wars case that we're in the middle of at the moment.
Yes, we expand on that.
You live over here with me, so we're East Coast people, so we don't have access to all of these. But in Utah and Arizona right now, there are 3 cookie companies. One of them is our client, Dirty Dough. One of them is Crumble, and the third, I should have remembered their name, but I can't. But they all package gorgeous cookies, really interesting cookies in boxes. And so there's been an ongoing case, a passing off case. What's been interesting is to watch how different brands in this case have been enforcing their brand. And I can't speak about the litigation. I can sort of talk about what you can do pretty easily and what you can't. I think some great examples of enforcing your brands against others. I think effective brand enforcement usually comes from the brand. So there's almost this growth, right, of brands as living beings. I think it existed beforehand, but when you add social media, when you add user content and community involvement from consumers on top of it, these are living, breathing things. So you think terrific examples of brand enforcement from Netflix, where they had the Stranger Things pop-up bar occur. And
yes, that awesome cease and desist letter.
Because really what the message was, you love our brand as much as we do, so help us enforce it. Terrific, effective. It was great. The same thing when the M&Ms take action and you get a different M&M sending you a letter, red one, the worst one to get. This is really effective brand enforcement. It is not effective when you start slamming other brands online. It is not effective once you start giving a legal voice always to your brand. And those things can turn on you pretty quickly. And so the concept of going viral has a real place in brand management and brand enforcement. So you can use it very, very effectively, and you can use it very poorly. And I think this concept of going viral is something that we're going to have to grapple with as lawyers. I don't think it really matters how many units somebody else was selling or some of these things. If somebody's brand goes viral and everybody's talking about it, it's got something. We don't have a concept for that at the moment that I'm aware of. I've not seen any case. I'd love to see if someone has, but really you can see through these concepts of how people are interacting with brands and how brands are being used, how quickly and powerfully these things happen. And I think the challenge that we have is, can we, working in the legal field, really actually keep the pace of what's going on rather than slowing down some of these brands? And can we effectively help our clients and brand owners in this field to speak well with their brands, to use their brands well, and then when they need to take action, really doing it effectively rather than just legally. You can do both of those.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. I think our listeners would benefit from some actionable advice. What are your top tips for succeeding at IP protection in the future?
I work with a lot of startup companies at the moment. I've gone from working for very big Fortune 100 companies to very little companies. And it's really interesting working with a brewery this week, and they are small enough to be nimble, but they're just big enough to start to have copycats. And my advice is, I'm not just justifying what I do. Go ahead and file for protection of your brands earlier than you think you need to. It's way cheaper if you do. It's really not that expensive. Do it early and then have that ready because you might need it. And to that point, though, all of these are useless. It's useless having a trademark registration. if you are not monitoring. And so therein come these, providers and platforms like yours, right? Which is put it in that it's not that expensive anymore to go off and monitor your brand. And then when these things come up, be careful not to let too many of them go by as a passion. Letting them go by without actually putting a plan around it means that you might be giving up your rights. And so go and speak to somebody. Don't just say, oh no, here it is again. Act, get the protection and get the information that you need. But then once you've got the information, make sure you put a strategy around it. Don't just let things go. And that should put you in a better position with your brand than no protection and no strategy.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing all your valuable insights on, IP protection. It's clear that the landscape of intellectual property is constantly evolving, but I think with the right strategies and the technologies that we mentioned here today, we can stay ahead of the game. Jayne, if our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about Sander IP Law, where would be the best place for them to go?
Just go straight to our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, but I'm Jayne at sandersiplaw.com, and love to chat with you and see how we can help you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Future of IP Protection. Thanks for listening to the Future of IP Protection podcast, brought to you by Mark Vision. If you enjoyed today's show, please do us a favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you'd like to learn more about how Mark Vision can help you transform your IP protection strategy, visit us at markvision.com. Thanks again, and I'll catch you on the next episode.